Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another garden benchtop tutorial. The focus of today's video is about this beautiful Monstera deliciosa, which I received during the COVID lockdown. I've had it for a couple of years now, and it's been growing quite nicely, but there are a few things that I've noticed recently that is suggesting to me that it's time for this guy to be repotted and potentially have a moss pole installed for it. And more specifically, a couple of the leaves on this Monstera have developed brown tips, which is a bit of cause for concern in my books. And the reason why the brown tips on the Monstera leaves have grabbed my attention is because it's usually the first signs that there's something wrong with the Monstera. So whenever you see brown tips developing on your indoor plant's leaves, make sure you pay attention and familiarise yourself with the potential causes. In this video, we're going to be running through the reasons why a Monstera may develop brown tips on its leaves. And even though I suspect I know the reasons why this Monstera is showing brown tips, we're going to run through a comprehensive list so that you can use this video to troubleshoot your own Monsteras. So let's begin and get our hands dirty. If you look closely, I'll show you the leaves that are causing a bit of concern for me. Now, it may not seem like much, but the reason why I'm starting to get slightly concerned about this Monstera is because of these brown tips that are starting to develop. There's also this brown tip here. You can also see the healthy new leaves are starting to curl, which is an indication that it's not entirely happy. Now, one of the main reasons why a Monstera may develop brown tips is because it's been underwatered. And the first signs that develop when a plant doesn't receive enough water is brown tips developing on the plant's leaves. There are also a few other signs that you can look for, such as droopy leaves, the plant looking a little bit lackluster and falling over, as well as dry soil. Now, we know at the garden benchtop it can be a bit tricky for new plant parents to find that perfect balance of water. And there's a few things that you can do to help you along your way. Things like using a soil mix that has the ability to retain water for your plant, as well as installing something like a moss pole, which can act as a secondary water source for your Monstera. Another reason why your Monstera may be developing brown tips, which is somewhat related to an underwatered Monstera, is the lack of humidity. Monsteras are tropical plants, and therefore naturally live in a humid environment. So when there isn't enough moisture in the ambient air around a Monstera, what happens is the transpiration process accelerates, which means the leaves release water at an accelerated rate. And one of the most vulnerable points on the leaf is the tips, which is why it starts to brown there first. So where I live at the moment, it's now approaching winter, so humidity levels are going to drop. But there's a few things you can do to help retain that moisture in the air around your Monstera. And one of those solutions is installing a sphagnum moss pole. When you have a sphagnum moss pole, the sphagnum moss evaporates water and contributes to the moisture level. You can also group your indoor plants together, and the collective transpiration of all the plants helps to increase the humidity around them. And the last solution we like to use when we need to boost humidity around our indoor plants is placing them on a pebble tray. Pebble trays are fantastic because all you need to do is top them up whenever you're watering your plants, and the water will evaporate and help to keep the air moist. Another potential reason why a Monstera may develop brown tips is excess exposure to sunlight. Now, even though Monsteras naturally grow in tropical regions, they actually grow on the lower levels of the tropical forests. So they're shaded by the canopy of the forest, which means that they don't get a lot of exposure to direct sunlight. So if your Monstera is being exposed to direct sunlight, the intensity of the light will cause the leaves to dehydrate. So when the leaves start to lose too much moisture too quickly, the tips of them will start to brown. There's a few simple solutions you can do to protect your Monstera from direct sunlight. The easiest solution is to move your Monstera away from the direct sunlight. Keeping it in a bright position that receives indirect sunlight is perfect for a Monstera. Alternatively, if you're restricted on space in a small apartment, then you can filter your sunlight using a sheer curtain. Another potential reason for brown tips in your Monstera is the quality of the soil. Now, if you've got a Monstera that's been in soil for a couple of years, the brown tips developing on your Monstera's leaves may be a sign that you need to start thinking about changing your soil and giving your Monstera some fresh, rich, fertilized soil. So my Monstera's been in this soil for about 2 years now, and I'm starting to think that it's time for some fresh soil for this guy. And I've actually made another video showing you the exact recipe that I use for Monsteras. It's a great combination of regular potting mix mixed in with some chunky elements like bark and leca balls. So if you're interested in finding out the exact recipe, I'll put a link in the description below and in the top right hand corner for you. The last reason why a Monstera may develop brown tips is fertilizer burn. And essentially what that means is the soil has some excess chemicals in there which it may have turned toxic. This can result from, again, the soil becoming too old, or if you've been fertilizing too much and the unused fertilizer chemicals have built up so much that it's starting to poison your Monstera. Usually when a Monstera experiences fertilizer burn, it won't just be the brown tips, you'll also see other brown and yellow patches starting to develop. Now that we've covered the 5 main reasons for brown tips developing on your Monstera, let's distill all that information and apply it to this Monstera in front of us. So when I look at this Monstera, I can immediately see signs of underwatering. Along with the brown tips that are developing on the leaves, the other signs that are pointing towards an underwatered Monstera, the curling leaves and the droopiness of the leaves indicate that it doesn't have enough water. You can also see that this soil is starting to look a bit old and has lost its ability to retain water. So bringing this all together, I suspect my Monstera is suffering from being underwatered because of poor quality soil and a lack of humidity. So to resolve the problem of the brown tips, I'm going to repot this Monstera into some freshly made soil, and that will reintroduce some water retaining properties within the soil. I'm also going to install a moss pole for this Monstera. And not only will that increase the humidity around it, it'll also encourage the aerial roots which are starting to develop on the main stems. And the moss pole will act as a secondary water source for this Monstera. And I'm actually going to use the self-watering moss pole that I made in another video. And I'll also put a link in the description below to that one. And what a self-watering moss pole will do, it'll give an immediate boost to the humidity for this Monstera. Not to mention that it'll help with the aesthetics of this Monstera by propping it up and allowing it to grow vertically like it wants to. So the next video in this series, I'll be showing you how I repot this Monstera into some fresh soil, as well as staking it to the self-watering moss pole. So like I said earlier, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you'll be notified when we release that video. In the meantime, as we always say at the Garden Benchtop, thanks for watching and go get your hands dirty.